Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I am your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by The Athletic here. Today on the show, we're going to do another recruiting podcast. I wanted to talk recruiting because I went out in Las Vegas. I've gone out and actually been out on the recruiting trail a bit more this year. And to join me in that endeavor, I have brought on Evan Daniels from a wide variety of places, Scout.com, Fox Sports on TV, any which place that you want to talk about. I'm sure that you can see Evan's face talking about high school kids. He's one of the best in the entire industry. Before we get to Evan, I want to apologize very quickly because the sound's going to be a little bit funky in this one, just as it was in the last one. What ended up happening here is I have these nice set of, Apple headphones. Those broke on me on Sunday. Before I started recording with Scott Phillips on Tuesday, my actual microphone broke that I used to record podcasts. So I have another one in the mail. It will be here on Saturday. This is the last time you're going to have to listen to really scratchy, fuzzy voice on my end. So, Evan, I'm sorry that you kind of had to be the guinea pig on this one where I'm sure you can hear me, but it's not necessarily the best quality.
Dude, it's all good. I started a podcast last year, and I had my fair share of sound issues, and I had my fair share of issues. We'll leave it at that.
In Evan's podcast, which you can catch, what is it? Is it with Fox Sports still, right?
It is. It's called The Sidelines.
Yes. Evan gets a lot of great guests. He gets a lot of college basketball coaches, a lot of really great analysts to come on and join him. I would suggest subscribing to that show as well as this one. Evan, let's get into this. You get out on the trail more than anyone. You just got back from a 22-day trip in Vegas, in Europe, away from your home, I believe in Lexington, Kentucky. How was this trip? What did you see? What was your overall overarching takeaway from this?
Yeah, it was a fun trip. It was a tad ambitious, 22 days away from home. And as I mentioned to you off air, four days before you're going to move is a little ambitious, but at the same time, it was a lot of fun. And I was able to mix in a little bit of a vacation in Europe, but primarily was in Europe to go to the FIBA Under-18 A's and B European Championships, and then the Under-16 European Championships, and then obviously I was in Vegas watching the top high school players in the United States. In terms of like a big takeaway, I don't know if, at least from Vegas, I don't know if there was a huge one, outside of the Zion Williamson LaMelo Ball night was interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that. I did not go to the game. I don't quite understand the draw, I guess. Yeah. I do from a Zion Williamson standpoint and his pure athleticism, but the other side of it I don't quite understand. So I actually boycotted and went and watched Emmanuel Quickley play the best game of that I've maybe seen him play.
Well, you were just like on a court, like right next door even too. So like you got the image you needed.
Yeah, no, I was right behind it. And in fact, one of the guys that works for me, he actually taped the Zion Williamson LaMelo Ball game, and we couldn't get in to the building. They basically shut off people getting in. They ended up letting us and the coaches that were waiting in, but for about 45 minutes to an hour, they legitimately weren't letting anyone in the building. I'd never seen anything like it, honestly, in high school hoops, and I've been around for 10 to 12 years. But when we walked up to the court, he basically had to sneak under chairs and under bleachers to get to the baseline just to be able to record the game.
Yep.
And I didn't watch it, but from what he told me, it was the most exciting game in the world.
I was sitting there front row for it. Don't.
Yeah, yeah. I heard it wasn't exactly the best basketball. But like I said, I didn't watch it.
Well, all of LaMelo Ball and the big ballers games end up devolving like that anyway. And I don't mean that to trash LaMelo Ball, but they just always end up in like a game that's really not worth watching.
Right, no question. It's I don't know. They just play such a weird, unique, not really basketballish type of way.
Yeah,
it's the best way to put it.
That's what it is. But go ahead
But
and continue.
I got a little off topic, but the Europe trip, I think maybe my takeaway was just how different that type of environment is than maybe the basketball that I've been used to watching for so long.
For reference, what tournaments did you go to?
I went to the European Championship FIBA U18s and Bs. The Bs were in Tallinn, Estonia. The As were in Bratislava, Slovakia. And then went to the FIBA Under 16 A European Championships. And those were Podgorica, Montenegro. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe one of my biggest takeaways from that was just how skilled. It's really a skill game over there, and the lack, at least compared to the high school players in the United States, not near the athletic ability, not near the physical play. But I think to a degree, like, I had this conversation with a couple coaches and a couple people that were over there at the same time. Like, you go to an AAU game and you see a 6'10" big man, and sometimes, as a junior, the dude doesn't even know how to wall up.
Yep.
Over there, they did. But they just didn't have the athletic ability or could handle the type of physical play, I think, that maybe you see in the United States. But and that could be a much longer topic. But those were probably my two biggest takeaways from that trip.
Well,
also, I must add, I went to Dubrovnik, Croatia, most beautiful place on earth.
Yeah,
that was another takeaway.
You sent me a photo of that, like whenever we were talking. I've been trying to get Evan on the podcast for a little while now, and I was like, "Yeah, Evan, go have fun in Europe." And I think he sent me a photo, or I saw it online, or something like that. And it was just like this beautiful, like, cliff of you, like dinner or whatever, you and your hotel, and I was just like, Jesus, I need to go to that place. That looks amazing.
Yeah, it is honestly, for anyone, I would say put it on the bucket list. I just started Game of Thrones. I didn't really watch it, but that's where part of Game of Thrones was shot. It actually kind of led me to watching the first couple episodes on my flight back. But if you're a Game of Thrones person, probably a bucket list item.
Yeah. So let's kind of talk about the European thing real quick, because I find that really interesting. Because I talk to NBA executives, as I'm sure you do, and I feel like the overarching public perspective of the European versus American gap is that it's closing. Would you agree with that? That, like, a lot of people kind of believe that Europe is getting closer in terms of talent to the NBA, or to the general.
I did not come away, and I know I think I'm probably. I think people probably maybe disagree with me. I did not come away with that thought.
Yeah. That's actually where I was going to transition to next. You talk to people that are actually over there evaluating basketball and NBA front offices and everything. They say that it's actually getting a little bit wider because of the athleticism difference.
I would agree. And that's not to say that I didn't see some really good players and some really talented players, because I did. Between the hard part too is, I'm over there really more watching the kids that are going to come to college. So, the top layer at the FIBA U18As, you basically cut off because they've already signed some professional deals.
Yep.
But I did not come away with that opinion. I think there's a large gap from an athletic ability standpoint. And I mentioned that I think, as a whole, the skill over there seems pretty high. But just the lack of physical play and to be able to handle contact, I think, is a little bit of an issue. And like I said, I did see some good players. There's a kid from Turkey named Atar that is a very good player. I mean, I think he's got a chance to play in the NBA.
Egi Atar, I believe is his name.
Yeah, I saw some very good players, but I don't agree with the notion that the gap is closing, at least not from what I saw.
Yeah, I mean...
And I was actually, and not to cut you off, Sam, I was actually kind of disappointed with the amount of talent at the U16s. I was expecting there to be a lot more what I would call high major level talent, and I didn't see that. Sure, there was a handful, but I mean, there were plenty of teams that barely had mid-major players.
And that's really interesting to me too, because you see a lot more college coaches trying to go overseas and maybe exploit what they believe can be a marginal efficiency by recruiting overseas instead of being reliant on American talent. And it's interesting that you bring up the point that there just really isn't even enough like mid-major talent over there.
Well, I would say that if I was a mid-major coach, I would actually recruit Europe very hard.
I agree with that, but like it's just interesting that you say that like also there is you didn't see a ton of talent there either necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, from the U18s and Bs, probably walked out of there with 60 guys that I think have the potential to play college basketball. Mm-hmm. The U16s was a little harder to determine. I would say primarily of those 60, that a good chunk of those were mid-major players. Mm-hmm. See, I think it's a niche market, and I think it's only going to grow. Yep. And there's a variety of reasons why. I think that from a money standpoint, contracts for the younger players seem a little harder to come by than maybe previous. Yep. I also think the world is shrinking in a sense that you can gather information and intel and video on these players so much easier than maybe you could 10 years ago.
It makes targeted scouting a lot easier.
No question. You can find out intel and gather information. And I also think that, some of the agents that are involved with some of these kids are more, maybe more open to having these players come to the United States than maybe they had in years past. Come to the United States for college, maybe in years past. But to get back to my point, like I think that I saw quite a few mid-major players and some guys that would be very good mid-major players in college basketball.
Yeah, no, I generally agree with you that I think mid-major coaches should go exploit that market as much as they can. And, obviously their budgets are more limited, but if you can find a way to, as we mentioned, target who you're scouting and finding the right players, I think it's a great market for them to go to. But let's talk about American kids now, because I'm sure that that's what a majority of my listeners want to know about. Let's quickly touch on Marvin Bagley. I don't really want to belabor that too much just because I talked about it in depth with Scott Phillips on the last podcast. But Evan, just what are your overall overarching thoughts on Marvin Bagley committing to Duke, reclassifying, and likely vaulting to the top of 2018 NBA draft boards?
Yeah, I guess to start from the Duke angle, I mean, I think they did a ridiculous job recruiting him. And I think
you keep mentioning this online.
Yeah, I think that people think that this thing just happened over the last 6 weeks and like the kid just decided that he's going to reclassify 2 months ago. I think behind the scenes this has been in the works for over a year. Mm-hmm. And I think, and obviously the family held that from a lot of people. I mean, I actually remember asking the father at Hoop Hall Classic in January because I'd heard rumblings, if that was a possibility. And he denied it to me then.
Yeah, they keep things very, very close to the vest. It's always very difficult to kind of figure out. And I think that's a reason why their commitment to Duke, while I think Duke was the favorite going in, it was far from a sure thing, as it is with many prospects who end up committing this late in the game.
Yeah, no question. No question. So I think behind the scenes, Duke's been working on that for a year. And I think the kid really started taking it more seriously towards the end of his last high school season because he had to take some online courses and get some stuff in order. And obviously that all escalated and it kind of leaked out in January, in July. But I think this was a Duke setup from the beginning. I think even down the stretch, a lot of the schools involved, I mean, there was a faction of people, a group of people that thought that USC was going to get him, especially late, and that was nothing but a smokescreen. Mm-hmm. I think it was a setup for Duke from the beginning. In terms of him as a player, I think he was easily the best high school prospect and player in high school basketball. At 6'11", he's very mobile, he's athletic, he's got quick twitch muscles, very fluid, he plays very hard. Offensively, he's versatile, Sam. I think that he can score the ball in so many ways. Yeah. He can face up an attack from the perimeter or the elbow. He can make mid-range jump shots. He's got hook shots over either shoulder and really nice touch around the basket. He's a really good rebounder. Now, he doesn't shoot the ball great right now. I think in time, though, that he's going to be a perfectly fine shooter. I'm not saying he's going to be a great shooter, but he will be an above-average shooter.
I think I agree with you there. And if that's the case, if he does end up being like even a 35% three-point shooter from the NBA line, you're talking about 7-time All-Star. Like, he's just that athletic, that quick twitch, plays that hard, has the right kind of mentality. If the jump shot comes along, it's game over, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I don't do this very often, but I tweeted that the over and under on NBA All-Star games for him is 5.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I think that's the right number, like 4.5, 5.5, whatever. If you want to like make it a half, just to make sure that no one can tie. I would say over. I think.
Yep.
I would bet on over. I can't remember the last prospect where I would bet over on that though. Like 5 All-Star games is insane and really ridiculous.
No, I agree. I think he's that good. I think, everyone's going to question the winning factor because he didn't win on the UIBL circuit. Their team was bad.
Yeah, for people that saw that team, they had no guards whatsoever. Like anyone who saw them understands the losing aspect.
Yeah, and I think if the group of people that would point to the losing and why did he not win a game or only one game until Peach Jam, I would point you to. And I guess they didn't lose quite at the same rate, but Anthony Davis's high school team was horrendous. Yep. So regardless, I think he's a big-time talent. I think for me, I think he would be, and I know there's a lot of people that disagree, I think he's probably the favorite for the number 1 pick in the 2018 draft. But there's also some really good competition now. It's funny, that draft just seemed like a year ago, it didn't seem like it was going to be a very good draft.
Yeah.
Now, the top 3-4 spots, I mean, you're getting really good players in those spots.
Yeah, I mean, Luka Doncic really came on strong over the course of the last 6 months of Real Madrid's year. Michael Porter, obviously, his growth over the course of the last year has been incredibly strong. Mohamed Bamba, I'm a little bit more questionable on him than I think a lot of people are, but I certainly understand the tools and the talent. DeAndre Ayton has more tools and talent than I think anyone in the class, but it's all going to depend on how hard he plays, what night you get him, and how he's coached going forward. I think the way that he's coached is going to be more important than, what his actual tools are from this stage, because he already has those. We know what he can do. He just needs to, kind of take that next step into being a consistent, dominant threat.
I completely agree. I actually think the guy that's getting forgot about a lot, and you mentioned him, is Mohamed Bamba.
Really?
Yeah, I think that. So he has the physical stuff. He has this extreme length, the standing reach, the mobility. I think people think that he's really raw, and I don't think that at all. Like, I'm not saying he's super polished, but I think he's a lot better on offense than people give him credit.
For me, it's more motor. I again, don't see him play like crazy hard all the time.
He's been up and down in that. There's no question. I've seen him play really hard, and I've seen him float. I don't think that he's going to be allowed to float.
That's true.
And I also think that he's a smart kid, and he's also a kid that wants to be good. And I think that he's gonna pick up and know that he has to bring it night in and night out. I watched some clips. Mike Schmitz tweeted out some video of Texas playing in Australia. I think it was this morning. And I watched those clips, and he made a jump shot, he made a hook shot, like he finished off plays around the basket. Like, I just think he's a little better offensively than anybody's given him credit for. And granted, he's not. I'm not saying that he's like super skilled and LaMarcus Aldridge like or anything like that, but I do think that he's going to be really good. And I'm not telling you he's going to be the number 1 pick, but I do think maybe. If you can be slept on by just being a top 5 pick, maybe he's been a little slept on.
Well, what I will say too for him is that where he needs to get to offensively is far lower than where other elite prospects need to get to offensively.
That's a great point.
Just because he's so long, he's so mobile out on the perimeter. Like, he is legitimately a defensive player of the year candidate. in the NBA at some point. Like, I find it hard to believe that he won't be that good as long as he plays hard. And given what you've said, people who know him say that he wants to be good. That stuff is really important to me. I'm interested in him. I don't think it's necessarily the rawness. Having said that, I don't really buy the jump shot at all yet.
Right.
He has like a long motion. I don't really think that it's really all that functional in games yet necessarily. But again, his level that he needs to get to offensively is essentially be a good screen setter and be athletic enough to catch lobs like at the top of the box, on the backboard. If he can do that, he's an effective offensive player in the NBA.
No question.
So,
no question.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point with Bamba there. Let's talk about this next class, though, because that's ultimately the reason that I brought you on this podcast, was to talk about the 2018 class, and we've gone now 22 minutes or whatever and haven't talked about it yet. So let's talk about those guys. RJ Barrett released his list of 5 schools. I believe it's Kentucky, Duke, Arizona, Oregon, and Michigan. Is that right?
Yep.
RJ Barrett, for me, is the very clear number 1 player in that class now that Marvin Bagley has reclassified. Do you kind of stand with that, or do you believe he's a little bit closer to the pack in the 2018 class?
It didn't take any hesitation for me to put him number 1.
Yeah.
I think he is the best prospect. It's a kid that scored 38 points in the semifinals of the U19 FIBA World Cup, knocking off a much more talented USA team.
Yep.
At 6'6", he can really score. He's a good athlete. He's not like super explosive, but he's definitely good enough. I think it's
more polish is his game.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing about him, Sam, is as good as he is and as good of a scorer he is, he's a below average shooter right now.
Yeah, I agree.
So there is room for growth, and I think, and just from the research I've done on him, I know he has a really good work ethic, and I know he desires to be a really good player, and I think in time he's going to be a fine shooter.
Yeah,
so there's room for him to improve as good as he already is, and I think that's great to see.
Yeah,
he's far from a finished product.
Yeah, I've talked to some people who get like a Shabazz Muhammad vibe from him, but that doesn't worry me at all. Yeah, the work ethic and the feel for the game is just so much higher that I think he's going to be totally fine. Like I think go ahead.
Muhammad in high school had some bully ball to him.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking.
I think RJ does too, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it's more
not to the same degree. Like I think RJ is more polished in some ways. And don't get me wrong,
better.
Shabazz was a very good high school player.
Yeah.
A very good high school player. I just think RJ's upside is far superior.
I agree. The footwork is much better. The feel for the game is much better. He's a far better passer, I think, than what Shabazz Muhammad was. I think he's probably a little bit longer than what Muhammad was, too. I don't remember Shabazz having super long arms. Definitely like an inch taller or two as well. The jump shot, I think, is going to come along a lot better than it has for Muhammad. I do think that is a faulty comparison, but it's one that comes up, and I kind of want to dispel it more than anything. I do think that there is some, a little bit of truth to the James Harden comparison. The way that they are able to use their feet, the way that they get into opposing players' bodies, the way that they draw fouls. He's strong as hell for being like 6'6", 190, 200 pounds. I understand that one. Now he needs to get to the point that Harden did, where Harden became one of the best shooters in the NBA. We still need to see that from RJ Barrett, obviously. But I don't think that comparison is crazy far off either from what they were.
No, I don't think it's crazy. I just struggle. I actually struggle with comparisons in general.
Yeah.
Unless they just jump out at me. And part of it is I have trouble comparing the 17, 18-year-olds to the best players in the NBA.
Right.
And I know that's not. I know where you're coming from with that comparison in terms of their similarities in their game. I see that. I get it.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying RJ Barrett is going to be one of the 5 best players in the NBA and be an MVP candidate. It's all going to depend on how he develops from here.
Right, the way they operate on the court and how they play.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely some similarities there.
So, getting into the rest of this class, well, let's talk about RJ real quick. Do you have any feel on where he's going to end up at this stage?
I don't. I think it's a little early. If I was going to throw two schools as favorites right now, I'd probably say Duke and Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, he's going to go through these visits, and you can't hold me to that.
Sure. Yeah.
There's still a little ways to go in this deal. I talked to his father yesterday briefly after RJ put out that list. They're gonna work on setting up some visits and start that process here soon.
Yeah, it was interesting to me that Oregon was on that list, given that teammate in the U19 tournament, Abu Kigab, is that how you say his name?
Yeah, I think so.
He was a kid that really stood out to me in the U19s. He's headed to Oregon this year. There are a lot of little connections, essentially, with all of these teams. I think that we could try and connect the dots in every direction at this stage, and it would be valid. But let's get into the rest of this class. Who do you have at number 2 in this class? Because I think I come in it a little bit differently than what most do at this stage, but a lot of people have Zion Williamson there. Would you agree with that?
No, I have Bol.
Okay.
I think the improvement he's made, I saw him in January at the Nike Extravaganza, and then I didn't see him again until mid-April. And I thought the improvement he made in that short time span was ridiculous.
Yeah.
At 7'2", he's got great hands. He's got great touch. I mean, I don't know what he finished up at, but there was a point during EYBL, over 50 attempts, he's shooting like 49% from 3.
Yep.
He's a legitimate threat as a shooter from mid-range, from 3. His length obviously can impact the game from a shot blocking standpoint. He's not he doesn't race end to end and change ends tremendously, but certainly good enough.
Mm-hmm.
He lacks weight, and he's going to need to get stronger. And I still he can get pushed off the block some, but I think his upside is superior to some of these other guys, and some of it, him being number 2, also kind of I want to make sure I word this right.
By default, almost.
Yes.
Where, yeah, I agree. I think that all of these next kids, and I think Bol is certainly in the next tier, there is something lacking.
Yeah, I mean, when Marvin Bagley was in this class, it was basically him and a major, major drop-off.
Yes.
And even when RJ joined 18, I still thought it was Marvin far and away, and then RJ kind of in his own category.
Yep. And
then a drop-off.
Yeah.
And it's where you get interesting is Bol, Zion Williamson, Cameron Reddish, Romeo Langford, all really good players. I think in normal classes, probably not top 5 players.
Mm-hmm.
But in this class, they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I mostly agree with that, I think. Bol, we talked about Bagley having these very fast twitch muscles earlier. That's what scares me with Bol. He is very slow twitch anytime that I've seen him. And it's not to be unexpected, given that he's 7'2" and very clearly still growing into his frame from a physical standpoint. As you become a bit more muscular, as you continue to fill out your body, that stuff can change a little bit. You can get a little bit more fluid and get a little bit more explosiveness even as you continue to fill out. He's going to need that, I think, to really kind of live up to the lofty standard that I think a lot of people expect of him. He scares me from an NBA perspective, to be honest.
Got it. I get it. I think that you could walk through all these guys and pick them apart to a point where you don't love them.
Yeah.
And everything you said is valid.
Yeah. And the guy that, from a skill perspective, that I like the most is Cameron Reddish. 6'8", 7'1" wingspan, can handle the ball, can act as a point forward in transition, can do it, at the high post, can really even just full on play fucking point guard if he wants to. Can shoot it. I think he can shoot it. He just takes really shitty shots right now, but I think he's going to be able to shoot it one day. I see a ridiculously high skill level for him. He's the perfect modern day NBA 4. Man, does he not play hard anytime that I see him, and that's terrifying.
Here's the truth. Cameron Reddish should be the number 2 player in the class.
Yes, 100%.
he's oozing with natural ability and talent. You mentioned the physical characteristics. He has all that. I actually think that, and you mentioned his shot selection, he should be a very good shooter. I think he will be in time. I think the biggest thing for Cam is just bringing it on a daily basis, and honestly, it's been the knock on him from the beginning. And here's the positive thing is he's made steps in that area. You know, I thought in the spring he played relatively hard. Now I have a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth because I saw him in Vegas and I saw him have a rough game and he ended up getting hurt and ended up going to the hospital and tests were negative, thankfully for him. But he has all of the natural ability and talent to be at least the number 2 guy in this class. Now I don't necessarily know that he's earned it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the hard parts about what I do in terms of ranking these kids because, you know, ultimately I'm trying to pick who's going to be the best player. Well, how do you navigate between the highest ceiling and the most productive and, you know, who do you trust more in terms of how much they love the game? There's just so many factors. You know, right now I have Cameron 4, but, you know, it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up 2.
Yeah. No, Cam Reddish is... all the skills are there, and he just needs to bring it together. There were no complaints about him at U19 either from a motor perspective, which I found interesting. So that's, you know, again, maybe a step in the right direction. So we'll see going forward. Zion Williamson, there was obviously just a big thing in Sports Illustrated that he is the most famous prep player since LeBron James. I don't know how much I necessarily agree with that premise, but he is certainly, I think, the biggest name in this class right now. Every time I watch him, I understand the appeal, but am not as impressed as I feel like I should be for someone who has his profile.
No, I think that's fair. I don't know that he's the most popular basketball player since LeBron. I think obviously his highlight reel dunks, his freakish athleticism. I mean, he is, you know, from that standpoint, he is probably... I'm trying to think. He is as athletic, at least with that body type. I mean, his body type, you look at him and you don't think that he could possibly jump. I mean, he is an absolute freak in that category.
Yep.
I think that there are concerns about what position he is.
Oh, right now I think he's a 5. Like he can't do anything on the perimeter. He can't shoot from outside of 12 feet. I don't know that he can handle the ball in the half court. I think he's a really good handler in the full court when he's got a head of steam, but
yeah, I mean, when he has a head of steam, no one is stopping him in transition when he has a head of steam.
No, absolutely not.
I think that the concern, not only from a position standpoint, but like right now, he's allowed to play bully ball.
Yeah,
and I could go through examples. You know, different positions, way different players. Cliff Alexander played bully ball through high school, and he tricked people into thinking he could be a number 1 pick in the NBA draft. Unfortunately, I picked up on it. I didn't rank him number 1, but I still ranked him way too high.
Yep.
I didn't trust my gut on that. I get concerned with guys that are just so physical and so physically mature that's not going to last. The just being able to bully dudes. Now, obviously,
I think one guy to bring up here is Stanley Johnson. Like Stanley Johnson, you know, from Southern California out here, he just was 6'7", 240 pounds from the time he was 15, and was really good at Arizona. You know, top 10 NBA draft pick, but over the first few years of his career, a couple years of his career, especially last year, he's really, really struggled to find a fit in today's NBA, and they started playing him at the 4 a bit more last year, and that was interesting, but it's hard for those guys that are just so physically developed early.
Yep, no question. And I think if Zion is going to become the player that some think he will be, he's going to have to improve from a shooting standpoint. He's going to have to improve from a ball handling standpoint. What he guards will be interesting. I do think in college, like, he's going to be a ridiculous mismatch.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he's going to play in the NBA.
So do I, for sure.
how and to what degree and how good he is, I think is to be determined.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Most kids that are ranked number 2 in their class, I think that the impression of what their ceiling can be is, multi-time all-star in the NBA.
Right.
I don't know that I'm quite there yet. I mean, maybe from a ceiling perspective, Zion is there, but I don't know that I'm there yet on Williamson to think that he can be there. Instead of talking negatively about all these kids, let's move on to a position group that I really like in this class. I really like the point guards in this class. Maybe not necessarily from an NBA perspective, but I like the fact that there are a ton of them, from Darius Garland to Trey Jones to Quentin Grimes, who I think is going to play some lead guard, to, like Andrew Nembhard, even from Canada, who's going to be going to Montverde Academy, and Javonte Smart, and the kid going to Louisville, Anthony Simmons. Like, there are so many of these kids that I find very interesting. And you brought up maybe the best of all of them earlier in this show in Emmanuel Quickley. How do you kind of rate this point guard class at this stage, and what do you think of the depth that is this point guard class?
It's a ridiculous point guard class. To put it in perspective, 10 of our top 30 players in this class are point guards.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point guard class. I'm struggling a little with the top of it in terms of how to rank it. Right now, my top 5 are Trey Jones, Darius Garland, Emmanuel Quickley, Quentin Grimes, and Devin Dotson, in that order. The other 5 ranked in the top 30 are Javon Quinterly, Courtney Ramey, Javonte Smart, and Andrew Nembhard. Now, the top is where I struggle with, because Trey Jones is the ultimate winner. I think he's going to be better than his brother. He competes on defense. Really good scorer from mid-range, tremendous passer, tremendous leader.
I think his frame is a little bit better, too. He looks a little bit stronger to me at this age.
Now, he didn't shoot the ball well this summer. I think he was right at 31% from 3. But I mentioned it, he is the ultimate winner. Mm-hmm. Just like his brother was. So I have him the number 1 guy right now and number 7 overall, but how I went in the rankings was him 7, Darius Garland 8, Emmanuel Quickley 9, and Quentin Grimes 12. Darius probably has a higher ceiling, 6'2", long. Didn't shoot it great this summer, much better shooter than he showed. Now Darius has gotten a little shot happy, and probably turned more into a combo than a straight point, but a lot of natural ability. Emmanuel Quickley has really good size, length, has really improved as a three-point shooter, tremendous in pick-and-roll situations, reads those situations really well, and I think he's got a lot of upside on defense. And then Quentin Grimes is the guy that's really coming on, and he's always kind of been known as a combo, but he can score, he can distribute, and I think he's improving at just the right time. That's the long way of me saying this is a great point guard crop.
Yeah, Quentin Grimes, I think, might have the highest ceiling out of anyone. He has the just ridiculous frame. He has the just natural ability as a distributor and as a scorer. Haven't been super impressed with him as a jump shooter yet, but I think that might come along at some point. Like, it's not broken at the very least. Combo-y, but I think, like you said, from what I saw from April on through, through the Adidas Nations training camp that I was at, through Vegas, I was really impressed with what I saw of him. Javon Quinterly, I think, might have the best college impact of any of these players. I think that he's just so polished already. He's so skilled. He's a great distributor, really good shooter from what I've seen. I've been really impressed with him from a college perspective. Now, measurables, he's like 5'11", like 160 pounds, it looks like. So we'll see. Quickly, every time I watch him, I agree with you. I like the fact that he competes defensively and he has a really great feel. He reminds me a little bit of Emmanuel Mudiay in that regard. Do you agree with that at all?
Mudiay may have been a little more athletic. Similar size, similar competitiveness. I think Quick probably handles or takes care of the ball a little better than Mudiay did.
That's a good point.
Moutier's problem throughout high school and maybe even to now is he could get a little careless with the basketball. I think what I like most about Quick is just his ability to operate in pick and roll situations.
That's what reminds me of Moutier.
Yeah, and so I think that's fair.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about Quick is he continues to just get better. And it's always, the improving the jump shot was a big deal. Now, it's still a little bit of a set shot,
mm-hmm.
but he can really make them.
Yeah.
And that's something a year ago he wasn't doing.
Yeah, that's a good point. The rest of this point guard class, you bring up Devin Dotson as well. In Vegas, he played on Zion Williamson's team. From those games, I kind of came away a little bit more impressed with Devin Dotson. I think that it was probably more of an expectation game from my perspective, though, than Devin Dotson actually being better than Zion Williamson. But I really liked what I saw from Devin Dotson. He was very quick. He was under control the entire time. Ridiculous handle, I thought. I was really, really impressed because that was the first time that I had seen him up close like that.
Devin Dotson had a better summer than anyone in high school basketball. A better July. I say that wholeheartedly. I thought he was absolutely tremendous in July. I saw him at the Under Armour All-American camp, and I thought from a pure production and player standpoint, he was the best player there. I'm not saying he's the best prospect, but he was the best player there. He dominated every game he was in. And then in Vegas, he played well. This is a kid that has continued to improve, and he's improved from a ball handling standpoint. He's improved from his ability to operate in pick and rolls. He's making shots. He plays hard. He's competitive. I think he's even gotten to be a better athlete. So he was as impressive as anyone in July.
Yeah, and then another guy that I was really impressed with in July, just from a growth standpoint, was Lewis King. Same team as Cameron Reddish, team final out of Philadelphia. The thing that I was most impressed with from him was I saw him come out here in April during the live, or not during the live period, right after the live period for EYBL. He could shoot it a little bit. He took, kind of shitty shots, but whatever. He could, the mechanics looked workable, but they weren't quite there yet. But you saw it, 6'8", 200 pounds, great frame, very athletic, pretty much a prototypical combo forward in today's college game and in today's NBA. When I saw him in July, he was shooting the shit out of the ball. And that growth is really important for him. I think he would probably be a top 10 kid in this class for me right now, just given how much more important I think wings and forwards are than, some point guards, some big guys.
I would say that he was more been a little up and down for me, but I totally understand where you're coming from because I think he has really good upside. You like the physical gifts. He's capable of making shots. We actually had him 10 or 11.
Did you?
We dropped him up to more the 20 range. But I get it. And I also think that in this class you're really split. This kind of sounds crazy, but from 6 to 23, 24, you're kind of splitting hairs. There's not a big gap or difference between a lot of these players. So you can certainly make a case for it.
Yeah, no, I don't. I agree with you wholeheartedly when you say that. I think that the 2018 class makes your job incredibly difficult. Let's just talk for 2 minutes about the 2019 class. I don't like to get super far ahead. The guys in that class that I know of and that I have liked in the past, Charles Bassey, James Wiseman, Cole Anthony, and Cassius Stanley. Who else do people really need to know from that 2019 class going forward?
Probably Matthew Hurt, Ashton Hagans.
I like Ashton Hagans a lot too. I really liked him.
I actually have Ashton Hagans as my number one point guard in that class.
Yeah.
He's up there from a competitiveness standpoint with Colin Sexton and Josh Jackson. To me, I think those are probably the two most competitive kids I've covered to this point, and I put Ashton on that level.
You know what I really liked about him at Adidas this year? I like the fact that he is 6'4", looks like he weighs 170 pounds soaking wet, but just absorbs contact and finishes through contact with ease.
He's a physical dude now. Yeah, no question.
Really competitive too, really tough. I agree with you. I really, really like Ashton Hagans.
Yeah, he's very good. Now he's going to have to become a better shooter, but I think he can take care of the basketball a little bit better. But I go back to the spring where he played Emmanuel Quickley and Romeo Langford back to back, and outplayed Quickley. And he said, "I'm guarding him." He took him out of his game. Did a great job. And then the very next game, he took on the challenge of guarding Romeo Langford, and did a really good job. And this is a kid that's, he's a full year younger. You can just tell that his makeup is that of a winner and of a competitive dude. And he's a good distributor. He competes on defense. I think there's a lot of upside there too, just from his physical standpoint with his size. The shot worries me a little. But there's a lot to like about Ashton Hagans.
Yeah, there is. Evan, anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
Dude, not really. I enjoyed this conversation, man. This was fun. You do a good job, and I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, we'll have to do this again at some point soon. Evan, thank you for coming on. Find him at Fox Sports. Find him at Scout.com. Find him on the Sidelines podcast in association with Fox Sports. He does a great job. One of my favorite recruiting people, if not my favorite recruiting person out there on the internet. Reports news, breaks down basketball, does a great job of it. Follow him at Evan Daniels on Twitter.com. This has been the Game Theory Podcast. We'll be back next week. We're going to talk a little bit of NBA stuff at that point. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes. It really helps us move up in the ratings. Also, I will have a new microphone by then, so it won't sound as shitty as it does right now. Until next time, though, we will talk soon. Bye.